Okay, welcome. Welcome back. Hello. Welcome back and welcome to everyone on Zoom. Welcome to the final workshop of the year in the history of material text. I'm Zach Lesser of the English department, and I co-organized the seminar with John Pollack of the Kislak Center, Jerry Singerman, Humanities Editor Emeritus at Penn Press, and Priya Nambrath, who's this year's Brisbane Schoenberg Fellow in the history of material text and keeps everything running smoothly. As always, if you're on Zoom, hopefully you know the drill by now, but make sure you're muted. You can put questions and comments in the chat, and Priya will bring them to our attention during Q&A, or you can use the raise hand function and we'll call on you to unmute and ask your question live then. In a second, I will introduce Roger, though I don't really need to introduce him, but I want to have two important announcements about next year first. First of all, I'll be on sabbatical next year, but the show will go on. And Julie Davis of History of Art, who, as you know, has presented many times to this workshop on the book culture and print culture of Japan. Julie will take over for next year as faculty director of the workshop. We'll be organizing next year's calendar very shortly, and John will be here to serve as co-organizer as well, which brings me to the second important announcement. Our other co-organizer, Jerry Singerman, has decided to step down from the role of co-organizing, though he plans to be in attendance many of the weeks as usual. Jerry first became officially involved in running the seminar in 2004, 2005. So 21, 2 years ago, when he ran it solo, I assume while Peter was on sabbatical.
I can't remember.
Or just failed to show up every week. He also directed the seminar in the fall of 2010, and he's been a co-organizer since the fall of 2011. And as you may know, he created, and for a long time, he published the material text book series from Penn Press, which has published 77 titles, according to the website, among them some of the most important and groundbreaking work in our field. So we're sad to lose his organizational skills, of course. We're very sad to lose his editorial brilliance, because he always took the first and best pass through the abstract of each presentation for us. We're not sad to lose his collegial companionship and insights at the seminar, because he will be here many weeks, and we're glad that he'll have more time for traveling with Liliana, who's also retiring this year, and of course for ceramics. So let's have a round of applause for Barry. All the work he's done. Okay, on to this week's presentation, which closes out what I think has been a terrific year of talks. As a reminder, you can find many, probably most of them, on our YouTube channel, and you can search our database of talks stretching back to the beginnings of the workshop in spring 1993 on our website, pennmaterialtext.org. And we'll see you here as usual, Monday nights at 5:15 in the Kislak Center and on Zoom once the semester starts in the fall. Now, Professor Roger Chartier has not always given the final seminar of the year in this workshop, but he often has. And he's been among the most consistent voices in the workshop's history. Roger, we might say, of early modern books, is a steady seller. Very glad to see old friends here who will know his previous work for this seminar, and we hope that his work brings some new friends to the workshop as well. He asked us in absolute seriousness to keep his introduction brief, and when Roger speaks, we listen, so I'm going to do that. So I'll just encourage you to look at our website, search for his last name, and you'll see the wide range of topics and questions that he's posed to this group over the years. There are 25 talks that he's given here over the years and counting. Tonight's presentation will be a continuation of this ongoing conversation. It takes place in our current challenging moment, spring 2026, as we reflect on both the past and the present across the university. So I will ask you to welcome Roger and also to welcome John, who will run the power.
Thank you very much, Zach. And as you said, it is the last seminar of the academic year. and I would like to thank the triumvirs that organized it during this last week, Zach, Jerry, and John. Two reasons explain the seminar I shall present today. Present with John, who has in the last 3 or 4 years made the digital illustration of my lecture and also organized this small but very interesting exhibition you can now see on the table. The first reason was the wish to participate in the revolutionary spring term at Penn by adding another contribution to the superb exhibition organized by Lynne and John, The Time to Right All Wrongs, France, Haiti, and Philadelphia in a Revolutionary Age. And you can visit, if you have not already done, on the other side of this building. And also, this revolutionary spring term illustrated by the recent conference, The Revolutionary Age, France, Haiti, and America in the same room and organized by the McNeil Center and the library. A second reason was the acquisition recently by the library of a small book printed at the end of the year 1789 entitled La Cocarde Citoyenne, Etrenne, Dédié à la Nation, à Paris, chez Jubert, Doreur, Rue St Jacques, vis-à-vis les Mathurins, numéro 36. This booklet I have presented briefly last year in the series organized by the library from the stacks, give its title to my talk today because it associated in the same binding, and you can see it on the table, associated in the same binding 3 components. First, a printed narration of the events occurred between July and October 1789, with 25 pages devoted to July 14 and the Bastille. Then, erasable pages presented as le nécessaire des dames et des messieurs. And finally, a printed calendar for the year 1790 that indicated for each month the days of the week, the name of the saints, and the phases of the moon. This modest almanac is located at the crossroad of 2 modalities of erasure, 2 modalities distinguished by the Oxford English Dictionary: erasure as obliteration, erasure as destruction. These 2 modalities will be the topics of my lecture today. The first history is an history often presented in this seminar, and particularly by Peter Stalybras, the history of erasable writing. Le nécessaire des dames et des messieurs is presented as, I quote, translating, a faithful and discreet custodian, useful for businessmen, merchants, travelers, soldiers, and all conditions, made of a new paper on which one can write with the help of a mineral stylus as distinctly as with a pen. Can write losses and gains, visits to be made, the agenda of the week, appointments, thoughts, witty remarks, fugitive pieces such as epigrams, madrigals, sallies, address, and so on. Jubert indicated that some copies were on donkey skin. Il y en a avec de la peau d'âne, for those who desired them. And he mentioned that it was possible to write on it just as clearly with the same stylus, and it can be washed several times to substitute other writings. The nécessaire is composed by 8 pages with printed frameworks indicating the days of the week for writing thoughts, appointments, and memories, followed by 26 pages for marking the gains and losses for each day of each month of the year, and finally, blank pages, 6 in our copy, intended for writing, I quote, one's personal matter, affaire particulière, or whatever will be desired with a stylus that makes the closing of the booklet. Jubert was neither printer nor bookseller, but Doreur sur Cuir, a leather gold gilder, who proposed either embroidered bindings for his small almanacs, almanacs à la Dauphine, as for example in 1784, L'amour victorieux, almanach chantant, or in 1785, Etrenne historique et galante des Français. But also he proposed gilded inscriptions and medallion for the cardboard or portefeuille or portfolio. His Cocarde Citoyenne, that associated a printed text and erasable pages, reproduced a formula that made earlier in Paris the success of the almanacs printed by the bookseller Louis Charles Desnos. In 1770, the Journal des Savants celebrated Desnos' new invention. The article began recalling the wide circulation and use of tablets. I quote, "Everybody knows that tablets are coated with a plaster prepared in such a way that one can write or trace with a needle what one wishes to keep. These tablets," follows this quotation, "these tablets have so far been found so convenient that few people do not have them." But, followed the article, the tablets that circulated were thick, rigid, cannot be easily reused. Hence, the importance of Desnos' invention celebrated by the Journal des Savants. I quote, according to this quotation, Desnos had made portable tablets of various sizes in the form of manual or pocket booklets. These tablets contain a needle or stylus. This is nothing other than the point of a particular metal, which makes the characters come out on this paper in a very legible and perfect way. But the writing can easily be removed with breadcrumbs, so that once the tablets have been purchased, they will be reused every year. It will be, concluded the description, it will be sufficient to change the almanac of the year. As earlier, the Dutch or the English writing tables, Desnos' tablet could or must be associated with a printed work, an almanac. Indeed, Desnos, who presented himself as the libraire et ingénieur géographe of the King of Denmark, inserted his erasable tablet within quite all his publications. In his catalogue des almanachs et Etrenne géographiques, published in 1771, the tablet economic because, said the prospectus, the pages can be reused, are inserted in different categories of almanacs: almanach géographique, almanach parisien, almanach des postes, but also in books for accounting, petit barème ou livre des comptes faits, or even in travel guides, petit indicateur fidèle ou itinéraire général. In 1783, Desnos' Catalogue Général d'Almanach announced 121 new books. I quote, "All these novelties are bound in Morocco, adorned with prints or maps related to each subject, furnished with a table of losses and gains, or not, at the choice of the buyers, composed on a paper of his invention, as beautiful as the Dutch paper, the papier de Hollande, on which one can write as distinctly as with a pen, with a mineral stylus adapted to these tablets, and which makes their closing. It is possible," said the text, "to erase the characters 15 to 20 times in a row with a small sponge soaked in water without altering the paper. Penn Library, thanks to Lynne and John, acquired in the last year copies of 4 Desnos almanacs published before 1789, and they are on the table. Almanacs that associated erasable pages with different textual genres. First, a table d'escompte à 5%, indicating the amount due at a 5% interest for different sums over a different period of time, and address this one to the merchants, bankers, cashiers, or other business people. Second, a poetic almanac adorned with prints representing mythological gods and goddesses and referred to Ovid's Metamorphoses. Third, a collection of chansons, romances, and vaudeville under the title Les Muses à Cythère ou Les Plaisirs de toute saison, chansonniers français, published in 1788. In an avis printed in this last almanac, Desnos acknowledged the competition of almanacs more or less similar to his own, but he stressed that they were in fact very different by the choice of the engravings and songs, by the nature of the paper and the stylus, by the elegance of the binding. For proving his claim, he invited the readers to come in his bookstore, Rue St Jacques, at the sign of the Globe, or to consult the catalogue of his almanacs, a small brochure of about 100 pages. The last of the Desnos books acquired by the library bound together 4 different parts. The 2 first were, or are, the Almanach du Bon Français, ou Bon Mots et Anecdotes d'Henri IV, 88 pages, followed by the Parfait Modèle orné d'estampes représentant les principales scènes de la partie de chasse de Henri IV, 28 pages, 12 engravings. Thus were associated a compilation of Henry IV's bon mots, jokes, apophthegms, with scenes extracted from a play written by Charles Collet, created in 1764, and very often performed with immense success during the reign of Louis XVI. These 2 texts were followed by 48 erasable pages, and in the copy of our library, by a calendar for 1792, 10 years earlier after the publication of the almanac. Desnos tablets that accompanied all his almanacs add another chapter to the history of both erasable writing technologies and hybrid books that associated printed text, page frame for receiving scribal annotations, and pages for receiving free personal writings. The existing copy of Jubert, Nécessaire des Dames et des Messieurs, bound with the Cocarde Citoyenne, presented an identical association, like in the books published by Desnos, presented an identical association between printed text and erasable pages. But they show also that the reader did not necessarily respect the destination of the pages or even their erasability. If the copy at Penn is quite without any handwritten annotation, the copy of the Nécessaire des Dames et des Messieurs, bound with the Cocarde Citoyenne, which is owned by a library in Nîmes, la Bibliothèque Carré d'Art, and the copy was digitized by Gallica from the Bibliothèque Nationale. A soldier who took part in the Battle of Valmy made use of the erasable pages totally independently of their framework for indicating himself, his journeys in the summer of the year 1792 from Melun to Toul and Metz, and then back to Valmy, where he arrived the day before the battle that occurred on September 20, 1792. On other pages, he recalled the names of the cities he has crossed or the places of his halts. He indicated also the payment he received or the names and addresses of people he met, and he wrote short poems, either because he remembered them or because he composed them. As for example, this one, jeune beauté qui craignait son empire, n'allez jamais jouer sur le gazon, c'est là qu'amour en feignant de sourire, dans votre cœur, il verse le poison. Young beauty, if you fear his power, never go out to play on the grass. That is where love, pretending to smile, pour poison into your heart. Many of his writings seem to have been written with the metal stylus, as it was suggested by the book itself, but they are retraced in black ink, as if the memories of such intense days, the battle, the itinerary followed by the soldier, must be possibly retrieved and not erased and lost forever. If the materiality of Jubert's La Cocarde Citoyenne, associating printed text and blank pages, was not new at all, its content was. Printed at the end of 1789, it is the earliest or one of the earliest almanacs with a revolutionary content. Its title indicated clearly its commitment, La Cocarde Citoyenne, Etrenne, Dédié à la Nation. Cockade was, as you know, a ribbon note worn at the hat, usually worn by the soldier with different colors for the different military corps. The cocarde or cockade became, in the summer of 1789, the, I quote, sacred sign of our redemption, as said Jubert in this almanac. And the almanac counted also the different moments of the transformation of the cockades. On July 12, 1789, two days before the Bastille, I quote, the green cockade is worn as a sign of hope to shake off the yoke of tyranny. On July the 14th, I quote, the red and blue cockade, the color of the city, Paris, was substituted for the green cockade, which was seen as abhorrent by the good citizens. On October 1st, the red, blue, and white cockade became the cocarde nationale, whereas the black or the white cockades were taken as a sign of betrayal of the patrie, of the fatherland. The title page of Jubert's almanac showed a cockade placed on a shield, backed with crossed sword and axe, reference to nobility for the sword, reference to the tiers état for the axe. And this cockade is accompanied by different weapons, pikes, guns, cannons. Two flags indicated fidélité au roi in a time of national concord, and prudence et liberté in a time of the distance taken vis-à-vis the violent acts. In the copy of the Bibliothèque Carré d'Art in Nîmes, the cockade was colored with a patriotic blue, red, and white. With such a title, the almanac will be, and I quote Jubert, as indispensable in the pocket of all true citizens, men and women, as a cockade is in their hat. Jubert's cockade is citoyenne. In 1789, the word, name or adjective, is acquiring a new meaning. The colors of the cockade, blue and red, that were, as I said, the colors of Paris, recalled the traditional meaning of citoyen, citizen, as inhabitant of a city. But the true citizen the men and women who wear the cockade are constituting the nation to whom the almanac is dedicated. The almanac narrates, I quote, the great events that have restored the liberties of citizens, and it recounts the history of the beautiful future day of la liberté française, French freedom. Thus, the preface of the almanac indicated both the transfer of religious vocabulary to civic values. The cockade is understood as a sacred sign, the events as a redemption, and also indicated a regime of temporalities that considered the future as already present, since the forthcoming days have already their history. In its title, the almanac is presented as an Etrenne, a gift generally given on the first day of the new year. This new year already present in the book thanks to the calendar for 1790, which is inserted in this text printed in the end of 1789. Dedicated to the nation, presented to an homage paid to the brave Parisien, the original Etrenne, or gift, will be more precious than the traditional ones, and than the traditional poetic almanacs published by Jubert, who said, this almanac does not contain songs, but the great events of the restoration of your liberties. The preface ends with two quotations. The first one is a proverb uttered, I quote, by the famous Sancho Panza, governor of the island Barataria. Faire d'une pierre deux coups, to kill two birds with one stone, as does the almanac, pleasant and historical at the same time. The reference to Sancho as governor of an imagined island in the chapter 45 to 53 of the second part of Cervantes' book was common both in popular plays staged during the Parisian fairs and in political pamphlets. We have two examples in the library on the table too. Printed in 1789, a burlesque and satirical ordonnance de police du très haut et très puissant seigneur Sancho Panza, gouverneur de l'île Barataria, based each article of this supposed administrative order, ordonnance de police, on comic accumulation of proverbs, as does Sancho in Cervantes' text. 10 years before, it is in Philadelphia that Sancho met poor Richard for establishing the moral principle attached to each day of the calendrier de Philadelphie ou constitution de Sancho Panza et du bonhomme Richard en Pennsylvanie, a book likely printed in Paris. The second quotation in the Cocarde Citoyenne is a poem, Les Commandements de la Patrie, previously published in a newspaper, L'Observateur, created by Gabriel Fedel in August 1789, opposing the gens de bien, the good people, to the parasitic lawyers or financiers. The quoted verses concluded by an address to the reader. You will destroy all abuse, and from slave, you will become happy and free. Et d'esclave, tu deviendras heureux et libre, assurément. L'Observateur is also implicitly credited for the title of the almanac printed by Jubert, since in the same issue, number 21, published on September 27, 1789, the newspaper has claimed, ne quittons pas la cocarde, let's not leave the cockade before the proclamation of the Constitution. The historical narrative presented to the readers must convince them that France had fallen into a despotic regime imposed by the aristocrats to the people and to the king himself. Such a tyranny was imposed since the reign of Louis XI by the Grand, the clergy, the Parliament, the minister. Their arbitrary power was exercised thanks to the lettre de cachet that allowed to incarcerate people without any judgment, and thanks to the Bastille, the state prison. The relation of the events happened in the summer 1789 in La Cocarde Citoyenne culminates with the fall of the Bastille on Tuesday, July 14, day of Saint Bonaventure. Good day, good work, claims the almanac. 14 pages are devoted to the Bastille itself, with an history of the fortress, a description of its towers, cells, and dungeons, and a vivid evocation of the torments inflicted to the prisoners. I quote, "The dungeons under the towers are filled with a mud which exhales the most offensive scent. They are the resort of toads, lizards, rats, and spiders. In a corner of each is a bed formed of iron bars, soldered into the wall, with some planks laid upon them. In this are put prisoners whom they wish to intimidate. There are 5 types of rooms. The most dreadful after the dungeons are those in which were iron cages. These cages were formed of beams lined with strong iron plates. They are 6 feet by 8. The history and description of the Bastille were literally copied from an anonymous pamphlet, Remarques historiques et anecdotes sur le château de la Bastille, published in 1774, and augmented from 48 pages to 144 pages in new edition published in 1783, and the pamphlet was republished in 1789. This pamphlet quoted an eyewitness account published in 1715 under the title L'Inquisition française ou l'histoire de la Bastille, written by the Protestant Constantin de Renneville, who had been imprisoned in the Bastille between 1702 and 1713. The author of the 1774 pamphlet, quoting Renneville, indicated that he had been himself prisoner in the Bastille in a sentence quoted in Jubert's almanac. During my stay at the Bastille, I was never able to see the chambre des oubliettes, the chamber of the dungeons. La Cocarde Citoyenne does not question the monarchy, but locates within an innocuous genre, the almanac, more widely circulated than the prohibited libels entered clandestinely in the kingdom, the denunciation of the heinous ministerial despotism of which the Bastille was the now destroyed instrument and symbol. I quote the Cocarde, "The end of liberty has struck its ancient foundation." The engraved plate inserted within the narrative makes visible an essential element of the text. I quote, "The banner of liberty raised at the top of its towers announces to all that France is going to be free and happy under the reign of the best and most honest man of the kings, le plus honnête homme des rois," the new Louis XVI. Thus, the destruction of the symbol of the despotism inaugurated, according to the almanac, the reign of the monarch of the citizens. It is why the demolition of the Bastille constituted in 1789 a second modality of erasure, a revolutionary erasure understood as both material and symbolic. As have brilliantly shown Hans-Jürgen Lusebrink and Rolf Reichert in their book, The Bastille, A History of a Symbol of Despotism and Freedom, a book published in German in 1990 and translated into English in 1997. As soon as it was invaded by the crowd, the prison is demolished. Cocarde Citoyenne. It was a beautiful and great spectacle to see some working to tear down this infamous prison, while others carried the cannons, the rifle, in short, everything it contained, to the Hôtel de Ville. For the Cocarde Citoyenne, such a destruction of the prison was ineluctable, inscribed in its despotic destination. I quote, "The dreadful lair of despair, that impenetrable labyrinth of the most inconceivable power, that odious prison, the shame of despotism, the terror of humanity is no more. The end of liberty has struck its ancient foundations. The Bastille is no more. Even before the demolition of the fortress that lasted until the end of the year 1789, the Bastille has disappeared, already erased in the minds of the Parisians, if not yet in the city landscape. Amidst the thousands of pamphlets or brochures printed in the year 1789, and which are the documentary basis for what I will say now, some of them, of course. Several of these pamphlets were devoted to the Bastille after July 14. One of them, under the title Recueil fidèle de plusieurs manuscrits trouvés à la Bastille, mentioned in a note 5 of the texts that describe the taking and the destruction of the fortress. The first of these books, Remarques historiques sur la Bastille, sa démolition et révolution de Paris en juillet 1789, bound together 3 previous books about the Bastille. First, a book we have already encountered, Renneville, l'Inquisition française ou l'histoire de la Bastille, published in 1715, and important because it framed the comparison, the identification between French despotism, of which the symbol was the Bastille, and the Spanish Inquisition. Then, Linguet's Memoir sur la Bastille, published in 1783, we shall encounter it a little later. And finally, the Remarques historiques et anecdotes sur le château de la Bastille, later attributed to Brosset du Perret, was the text describing the Bastille copied in the Cocarde Citoyenne. In a second part, the Recueil fidèle added a narration of the events happened in 1789 between July 12 until August 7, and a description, a narration borrowed from a daily newspaper, Révolution de Paris. The taking of the Bastille in this Révolution de Paris, copied in this Recueil fidèle, was described at the date of Mardi 14 juillet, in this manner. The august and sacred freedom made his way for the first time into this place of horror, that dreadful refuge of the despotism of monsters and crimes. The second text mentioned by the Recueil fidèle is La Bastille dévoilée, ou recueil de pièces authentiques pour servir à son histoire, published as a series of 8 installments compiled by Louis-Pierre Manuel. 5 installments were published in 1789 and 3 in 1790. In 1789, as a member of the Parisian municipality, Manuel became administrator of the police and of the book trade. In his La Bastille dévoilée, he published a selection from the dossier of the prisoners and spread new revelation in each successive installment, like shock waves. The publication of the archives by a former embastillé must keep present in the memories the erased prison. I quote Manuel. The taking of the Bastille, this monument of tyranny, built more than 4 centuries ago and destroyed in less than 4 hours, has just opened up a precious depository of archives, and we are hurrying to publish what it offers to us. You will find here an anthology of proofs and examples about the atrocities that ministerial despotism ceaselessly perpetuated. The rhetoric of the dévoilement, unveiling, disclosure, unmasking is a paradoxical device used for making present a past now erased. Manuel will use the word and the device dévoilé in the titles of 2 other publications he published in 1790, based also on archives from the Bastille and revealing hidden secrets. The anti-clerical La chasteté du clergé dévoilé, that denounced the sexual depravity of the clergy, and La police de Paris dévoilée, that exposed the corrupted police of the ancien régime. The same word, dévoilé, unveiled, is present in the title of several pamphlets printed in 1789 that either revealed secret identities, for example, L'homme au masque de fer dévoilé, or that exposed the corruption of ministers, le comte de Mirabeau dévoilé, le ministère de Monsieur de Calonne dévoilé, also the corruption of financiers exploiting the state and the people, for example, in a pamphlet titled Secret des sangsues, leeches, bloodsuckers, dévoilés. Other pamphlets unveiled hidden cruelties. Les oubliettes retrouvées dans les souterrains de la Bastille is a pamphlet devoted to the oubliettes, the supposed frightening dungeons located in the basement of the Bastille where the prisoners were horribly tortured, abandoned, and died. Fortunately, said the pamphlet, I quote, the destructive hand of time had just torn off the thick veil, vient d'arracher le voile épais that, since several centuries, had hidden for us the existence of the oubliettes, the dungeons. Before July 1789, the unveiling of the horrors of despotism led their author to the Bastille, as recalled the pamphlet titled Les lauriers du Faubourg Saint-Antoine, ou le prix de la Bastille renversé. I quote, for several centuries, Paris had been disfigured by a fortress, a shameful symbol of the servitude, of the esclavage under which this beautiful city has long groaned. Within its walls were confined those who exposed, dévoilaient, the horrors of tyranny. Once the Bastille renversée, overturned, turned upside down, unveiling the horror of the tyranny was also turned upside down. It was no more a pretext for unjust punishment, but a glorious civic duty. In the 4th installment of his Bastille dévoilée, Manuel denounced the forgeries or inventions published by some prétendus ouvrages authentiques, supposedly authentic works, and among them the Mémoire historique et authentique sur la Bastille, 3 volumes published in 1789 by the hack writer Jean-Louis Carrat. Like Manuel, Carrat published documents concerning the Bastille prisoners, documents that had been scattered in Paris after the storming of the fortress. In his discours préliminaire, he repeated the trope of the fortress erased before its actual destruction. I quote, those walls, built by vengeance and tyranny, have fallen. Those threatening towers, which held the victims of monarchical arrogance and the dreadful secrets of despotism have disappeared. For Cara, history must fill the empty space. I quote, "The impure blood of a few traitors slain upon their debris cannot appease the spirits of this unfortunate who mourned or died in that horrible Tartarus. It is therefore the duty of history to avenge, in the name of this unfortunate, the laws of justice that have been shamefully violated and all humanity that has been outrageously offended. The publication of the archives must accompany the destruction of the monument because, as affirm another pamphlet, Précis exact de la prise de la Bastille, written by Beffroi de Régny, I quote, "Future generations will find hard to believe this memorable revolution unless authentic and detailed writings preserve its memory and serve as an immortal monument commemorating this act of magnanimity. If the stones of the fortress will disappear, the printed words will be a monument lasting forever." Several pamphlets printed in 1789 linked the material destruction of the old fortress with a new beginning, which is, according to one of the meaning of the word revolution, also a renaissance, a return to a glorious and happy past. For a short pamphlet titled merely La Bastille, a pyramid erected on the site of the demolished prison will teach such a lesson of revolution as regeneration. I quote, "Let us tear down until last stone of these horrible dungeons and fill in these dreadful moats. Let a magnificent plain be substituted to these ruins, and let a simple pyramid rise in place of these dreadful towers, bearing witness for all future century that is only from today onward that we are truly free and French at the same time." The monument erected by despotism, I quote the pamphlet La Bastille, "This fortress where your tyrants, abusing their arbitrary power, imprison your parents, your friends, your brothers, will be soon destroyed. Such a destruction will be both erasure and regeneration." I quote, "Soon we will be able to say, thanks to God and our courage, we are finally witnessing the rebirth. Nous voyons renaître the bountiful time of Henry IV and Sully." It's a bridge with the Henry IV of the almanac I mentioned at the beginning of the talk. Thus, it is before the institution of a new calendar in 1793 that appeared in pamphlets and in newspaper references to 1789 as the first year of freedom. For example, in an anthology printed in 1790, presented as a collection of poems that have preceded and followed the Revolution, a collection dated l'an premier de la liberté, the first year of freedom. The idea to locate a simple pyramid on the ground of the demolished Bastille was perhaps inspired to the author of the 1789 La Bastille by the premonitory frontispiece of Linguet's Mémoire sur la Bastille, I already quoted, printed in 1783. In the middle of the ruins of the fortress, struck by lightning, is erected a statue of Louis XVI. The king is praised by 4 prisoners who were just liberated. The lightning is also striking the castle clock. The decoration of its dial as wrote Lynne, page 89 of his book, represented two figures chained together by the neck, the hands, the feet, and the waist. But in the frontispiece of the book, thanks to the lightning, the time of enslavement is gone. Three inscriptions give the meaning of the engraving. First, on the base of the statue, the word à Louis XVI sur l'emplacement de la Bastille, to Louis XVI on the grounds of the Bastille. Secondly, on a ruined wall of the fortress, below the destroyed clock, a sentence extracted from a royal declaration, August 1780, a declaration about the new prison that condemned, I quote, first in French, ces souffrances inconnues et ces peines obscures du moment qu'elles ne contribuent point au maintien de l'ordre par la publicité ou par l'exemple, deviennent inutiles à notre justice. This unknown suffering, obscure sorrows, insofar as they contribute nothing to the maintenance of order through publicity or example, become useless to our system of justice. And finally, last inscription, in the caption of the image, a verse from Voltaire's Alzire, Soyez libres, vivez, be free, and live. Before the total destruction of the fortress, some visitors of the Bastille thought it was necessary to copy and preserve the inscriptions engraved, supposedly, on the walls of the dungeons in which lived unfortunate prisoners. It is this task that Mauclair fulfilled in a short pamphlet whose title would have delighted Armando Petrucci and Juliette Fleming, Le langage des murs ou les cachots de la Bastille dévoilant leurs secrets, The language of the walls or the dungeon of the Bastille revealing their secrets. I quote Mauclair, my gaze wandered over all those heaped-up ruins. I occupied myself with trying to discover some inscription that might reveal to me the names of the people who had been held there. The epigraphic quest encountered successively a Latin verse written by the Counts of Lorsch, exoridi possit aliquis nostris ex ossibus ultor, may an avenger rise from our bones. A frightening sentence, l'horloge ne sonnera jamais pour moi l'heure de la liberté. The clock will never strike the hour of freedom for me, left by Monsieur de Sillé. 4 verses composed by Monsieur Davot. La main qui me retient dans ces horribles lieux va terminer mes jours par des tourments affreux. The hands that holds me captive in this dreadful place shall end my days with hideous torments. An inscription that read Riolet, procureur au Parlement de Bretagne, was imprisoned at the Bastille in 1788 at the beginning of the disorder, au commencement des troubles. And finally, a sentence written on a rolled piece of paper put into a hole of the wall, attributed by Mauclair to Lynne, who was held in this dungeon. The constitution of a state is generally nothing more than a work of chance, which time has shaped by imperceptibly rolling it down the slope of abuse. Le temps a façonné en le roulant insensiblement sur la pente des abus. Mauclair indicated, I quote, names, maxims, epitaphs, and occasionally verses of quite elegant turn are to be found everywhere, even in the preface. He added in a note that a young man who had visited the dungeons had discovered, I quote, a shred of red canvas on which was soon with a white thread the words, I respect the life of my king, that is my crime. J'ai respecté les jours de mon roi, voilà mon crime. Mauclair commented, why did this unfortunate soul, whoever he may have been, not add his name? We should know today who was this man victim of resentment of those who had no fear to commend him to commit so heinous a crime, the murder of the king. In 1789, another visitor of the Bastille, Michel de Cubières-Palmezot, who made a tour of the fortress guided by one of the vainqueurs of the Bastille, is also attracted by the language of the walls. I quote, "Struck by characters I perceived quite distinctly traced upon the middle of a wall, I drew near and read the following verses. Ixion, Sisyphus, Tantalus, why do you forever despair and utter such lamentable cries? You would be far more wretched had the god of vengeance thrown you into the Bastille. Vous seriez bien plus misérable s'il vous eût fait embastiller." And Jubert added, "A prisoner had no doubt composed this sorrowful and terrible inscription." During his visit, Michel de Cubières wanted to see the rooms occupied by Voltaire, Diderot, Crébillon, and Marmontel. He wrote, ironically, "The Bastille was always the residence of the gens de lettres and grands seigneurs, men of letters and great lords." By mentioning the philosophes who were held at the Bastille, as if their writing endangered the monarchy, Cubières offered a variation on a theme omnipresent in revolutionary pamphlets, the paradoxical quest for precursors for a rupture without precedent. In a pamphlet printed by Giroir, inauguration de l'année 1789, Jupiter receives in the Olympus the happy year 1789. He asks Mercurius to bring back from the Elysian fields the souls of the wise men and philosophers who had, by their writings, prepared the triumph of freedom. The list contains 8 names: Socrates, Plato, Montesquieu, Mably, Gordon, Voltaire, Rousseau, and Turgot. The works of these immortal men are placed on an altar erected at the foot of Jupiter. This library of the works that announced and prefigurated the revolution contained at the first place Rousseau's Contrat social, accompanied by Mably's Entretien de Phocion sur le rapport de la morale avec la politique, Plato's République, Montesquieu's Esprit des lois, Thomas Gordon's Discours historique, critique et politique sur Tacite, and without a specific title, Voltaire's, Raynal's, and Turgot's works. Conscious that Gordon was perhaps less known than the French philosopher, the author of the pamphlet added a note. These discourses by Gordon are very little known. This Englishman composed them to justify the judgment that had condemned Charles I. This work sets forth the true principle of the rights of people. Conclusion. Jubert's Cocarde Citoyenne described the Bastille as a monument as erasable as the writing inscribed on the erasable pages of his almanacs. But in both cases, erasure is never absolute and stands as memorial. The Gallica copy of the Cocarde Citoyenne kept the writing of its owner, who wrote them with pen and ink and not with a stylus, and who used the erasable pages of the tablet without respecting their intended destination. The demolition of the Bastille left stones that were carved as miniature replicas of the monument made by the entrepreneur in charge of the demolition, Pierre-François Palois, and it is possible to see some of these small replicas in the Musée Carnavalet in Paris. The demolition inspired also hundreds of pamphlets that unveiled in the present the veiled past of the despotic monument. Such unveiling is not without risks. Several authors warned against the proliferation of news that were fake news. Beffroi de Régny, alias Cousin Jacques, pseudonym he used for his publication, wrote in his Supplément nécessaire, "Readers must be on their guard regarding news concerning current events, for we have before our eyes several printed pieces filled with apocryphal facts. To be certain of what one writes, it is necessary to verify the facts. But verifying them takes time, a time which many writers do not take." He added, "Nothing fosters anarchy like the proliferation of anonymous pamphlets which beguile weak minds and usurp the confidence of the people. Whence in the title of the pamphlets, the frequent emphasis on their exactness, authenticity, whence also the creation of fictional characters presented as real prisoners liberated on July the 14th. It was the case with the Comte de Lorge, who had only a life on paper. In spite of the supposed inscription he wrote on the wall of his cell, according to the Langage des Murs, and in spite of the publication of his misfortune, that this, I quote, "old man whose beard reached down to his waist, venerable for the suffering he has endured and for the length of his captivity," supposedly told this misfortune to the author of the pamphlet, le Comte de Lorge, prisonnier à la Bastille pendant 32 ans. The events occurred in 1789 expressed and transformed the experience of time, both in the thoughts and in the emotions. As Lynne Hunt wrote in 2003 in her presidential address to the American Historical Association, and the text titled "The World We Have Gained," she wrote, "Time became an issue. It ceased being a given. Revolution meant rejecting the past, introducing a sense of rupture in secular time, maximizing and elongating the present in order to turn it into a moment of personal or collective transformation, and shaping the future in accordance with the discovery made in the present." The rhetoric of the pamphlets printed in the year 1789 suggests to further this acute reflection, but by emphasizing two paradoxes that are suggested by the pamphlet. First, the pamphlet described as already gone, as belonging to an erased past, a fortress still there. Second, they made contemporary the three regimes of historicity, distinguished by François Hartog, three regimes that were successively dominant in early modern and modern European experiences. The past as a repertoire of lessons for the present, as in the Renaissance. The future as an endless progress, as in the Enlightenment. And the present as an obsessive anxiety in contemporary time. In the pamphlets of 1789, it is only the current events, the revolution, that have rendered possible the unveiling of the buried and despotic past, and that have made already present the golden age promised by the eternal alliance between the king and the nation. If forgetting is a condition of memory, as wrote Paul Ricoeur, in 1789, erasures, in the plural, were the condition for making the past present, and for making this present already the future. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, John, for the illustration, PowerPoint.
And now we can moderate some questions. And Liliane, the first question, please.
Thank you, Roger, for the wonderful talk. You refer to the study process work on West tablet erasure. There was something else that I found quite remarkable.
Speak a little louder, please.
You referred to the question of erasure and the wax tablets that Peter Stadenbras has been working on. There is another work by Peter that is very resonant with what you are doing in a very strange way. And that was his talk on the costume books. When he talked about the costume books, dress was used to classify, to stabilize. When you wanted to get rid of something, you had to exclude it to the back of the book. What is happening now with the Cocarde is that you wear something that you can put aside, exchange. It is not now dressing, but also undressing. It is veiling and unveiling. It is the language of dresses that does precisely the opposite, doesn't produce stability or classification, but questions stability to the extent that even architecture, the stones of the Bastille, can function like a dress.
Yeah. I suppose at the beginning,
Yeah, the idea of this changing Cocarde that is such a powerful symbol.
Yeah, there was a series of substitution which can be considered as, in a broad sense of the term, as a form of erasure. And I trying to play with this in the sense that it's not exactly the same thing technically to erase something written on one of these tablets and to erase in the Parisian landscape this huge, intriguing and shared monument. But what also it seems to me at the beginning of your comment was this question of what traces are left by the erasure, as if finally erasure was a condition of a memory, and not only forgetting, but also erasure as a condition of memory, in the fact that the erasure indicates that something was and is no more totally present, and that you have to make the quest for this present absent present or present absent. And it seems to me that the rhetoric of the pamphlet, it's as you know, it's a subject which was 100 and 100 of pages, about 100 and 100 of pages. So it was a little difficult to find a way. But it seems to me that with this idea of the it's related also with the contemporaneity of the different temporalities, in a sense. That is to say, yes,
it's not classified for people.
Yeah.
But now the people change the dress.
Yeah, no, I think it would be interesting to follow this. It's the reason why we can start with a small booklet about at the university and end with Ricoeur and perhaps Heidegger. I have not quoted about this idea that the oblivion is a condition of memory, the famous quote retaken by Ricoeur. But there is something in common, and it's also the fact that the materiality of this philosophical reflection is absolutely essential. And I think, yes, that this the quest for the erased realities was the condition for their omnipresence.
Yeah. Davida, and then we'll take other.
Can you bring back the frontispiece of the Cocarde?
Sure. Give me a second. Yeah, hold on. That's Peter. All right, we're going to take a quick tour backwards. Will that work?
Yes. So I'm struck by this image that the bottom middle portion looks like countryside. Yep. And it seems like it would be a possible place to have an image that was a city, or something that was recognizably Paris, or something that was looking like the Bastille.
Yeah.
In that middle spot. And so, I mean, I'm wondering what you know about the design of that frontispiece, or if there's anything that can be discovered about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know nothing, but I think you are right that I never observed it, that the erasure of the city entire is on this first image. After, there is a series of engravings which are showing, as John has shown, the Bastille itself and the
And there are other,
ones.
yeah, it's true. It's weird. I was not.
We use already framed. It's possible.
Yeah.
Reuse
Yeah.
of your previous. It would be necessary to see the other Jubert. He has not published so much as Death Notes, but nevertheless, it would be interesting because it's very curious. I think here it's tabula rasa. I don't know if they are reusing this.
It could be because it's pastoral and, you know, sort of presents the promise of tranquility.
Pastoral landscape with guns.
Yeah.
Michael, yeah. Yeah.
Behind this
Clouds or combat.
cloud,
Yeah.
Just to
It's
stay
a radical erasure. Thank you for noting this because it had an element at the argumentation here. It's a real
Right. Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Michael, yeah.
just to stay with this image, what it really reminds me of are the theatrical models that Jacques-Philippe de Loutherbourg, which I probably just butchered how to get his name, used to make from 1770 onward, where you have a little scene. The reason why I was thinking that is because the two kinds of Roger, you've reconvinced me of two things. The first is that the way in which theatrical staging and performance go hand in hand with performing the revolution, and what you've been showing us is that problem that comes with performance, which is you have to then record the performance in text, but also which is also a form of erasure. But the other thing is why a writer like Anne Radcliffe and other Gothic writers, but especially Radcliffe, sold as well in mid 1790s France as she did in Great Britain, because it's all about what lies behind the black veil, unveiling, revealing, and also about what it means to be buried alive in an architectural structure. So this isn't really a question other than I was wondering whether you were thinking about the relationship between these very popular almanacs and other popular forms,
Like
especially theater and actually Gothic. Whether that connection helps or whether it's just something that you notice randomly.
Yeah, the only moment I mentioned this was this use of Sancho Panza and as a character for this play at the Theatre of the Fair in Paris before 1789. And what I don't know and would be interesting is there was an immense repertoire of the play performed during the Revolution, and their distance, accordance, relationship with some of the issue we discuss here. But I have never worked on this. There was some books about the theater during the French Revolution. It would be interesting to look at particularly this relationship, because it's a repertoire inherited in a sense. For example, Goldoni was performed very often during the year of the French Revolution. So it's it could be an argument for the past was destroyed, but it is still present, useful, teaching lesson, But no, it's a very good point, but I have the answer. You have to look at the repertoire and to locate the different plots. I was trying, but I don't know if the play about Henry IV was performed during the Revolution, but clearly it could be, in the sense that it's an embodiment of this new king they hope, even if it's a king of the past.
Yeah.
Here too, it's a kind of past becoming present in the reference to a king which is the opposite of the king which were despotic or were welcoming the ministerial despotism, because you have perhaps listened in the text, there is always in 1789, 90, the caution to avoid, to imply the king in the denunciation of the despotism. Always it's a ministerial despotism. And the idea is that the golden age will be the association between the king of the citizens and the citizens belonging to the monarchy of this enlightened monarch. It was also already present in the frontispiece of Linguet. Louis XVI is the first destroyer of the Bastille, right, in a sense. And so before the 14th of July, he has destroyed the Bastille, substituted this statue and the celebration of this freedom. So no, thank you for this. It would be interesting to see how the theatrical repertoire echoed or not this what you find in this revolutionary almanacs, or almanacs about the revolution.
Maybe the Bastille is a kind of explosion of Gothicizing language just there to be, taken up by novelists.
The other element, the vocabulary, the lexicon of the description of the Bastille. Of course, in this talk, I am talking about what people said of the Bastille, not the Bastille in its historical reality. Sometimes there is a certain concordance, other time it's a pure invention. This Comte de Lors, for example, is extraordinary because it is used, perhaps attributed to him, one of the inscriptions, where yes, it was a completely fictional character. So it's a theatrical dimension of this character, which was never existing, but nevertheless quoted as the eyewitness and of the atrocities of the Bastille. So it's something theatrical outside of the theater, in a sense.
Let's go online and Michael. Michael
Sophie.
And then go Michael online, then Sophie, then Peters.
Okay.
Michael, go ahead.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be in the same virtual room with everybody. I'm fascinated by the Palois souvenirs of the remnants of the wall of the Bastille, and there's a kind of uncanny parallel to 1989 and the souvenirs of the Berlin Wall that were sold for many years. And I'm wondering, Roger, what you would think of that comparison and whether it might bring up a kind of inversion of Ricoeur's dictum, not so much that forgetting is necessary for memory, but that memory, or at least a kind of material memory, is necessary for forgetting.
And for the Palois, for the pieces.
But I suppose you, how to say, first, for the quest, the epigraphic quest, as I said, for the inscription, as the traces of a past now obliterated or abolished. Of course, it's something which has different historical instantiation. The title I mentioned of this pamphlet is quite the title of a book published after May 68 in France, Les Murs ont la parole. Yeah. And John has in the library, we have this. And so, and all this graffiti has disappeared, but the book kept the memory of has been written once. And so I suppose for the Berlin Wall, there are also something parallel, not the inscription, but perhaps the remains in some of the monument of the wall, the monumental remembering of an entire situation, an entire system, an entire event. And so you are right. It's, we can look at the wall through history and with or without inscription. But when they are destroyed, they are the most powerful element for remembrance.
Sophie.
So I have a question really about the number of texts you found with dévoilé as the structure, something being unmapped or revealed. And I guess I wonder where the agency lies in these. In other words, these are the path of history is that these things, the Bastille, the police, are going to be revealed. Is in the structure of them, is it generally the author who is responsible for revealing something, or is it simply, la nation, the people, the path of history has made these things revealed? So I'm sort of wondering who, the structure of the titles doesn't give away where agency lies.
Right.
Who is unveiling?
Who is unveiling? Yeah.
Unveiling.
Yeah. Where's it coming from?
Yeah, you are right. Perhaps sometimes it could be the objects themselves. The pamphlet about the inscription in the Bastille, the walls themselves are dévoilés. Alors sometimes it could be the specific individual, like the quest for inscription by people was written under the name some memoirs, and in between, of course, the kind of metaphorical use of the unveiling, which is the nation, which is the people, which is the, and I suppose it would be interesting. I have not made this research. I wanted to make more about dévoilé in the 18th century because it was also used sometimes in the title of novels. Rétif de la Bretonne, there is a dévoilé. But not in the sense to show something negative. It was to communicate or share something. So the plurality of the meaning of dévoilé was also in the religious vocabulary. At the moment of the people, the nun abandoning their veil. Right. And so it's a very complex word. The dictionary are not very useful for this. I try to find in the Chartier, Richelet, the Academy, it's a poor definition, starting in general with a religious definition. The nun abandoning their veil and their order, and shifting to the idea of the secrets, which are made visible, which are exposed. But perhaps it's something to do, which can be made in deeper manner, and particularly, as you said, to detect clearly in each text who is the agent or the agency of the dévoilement.
I was thinking even of the frontispiece of the encyclopedia, the unveiling of truth.
Yeah.
So many different versions of them.
Absolutely.
The unveiling.
Yeah, the unveiling.
Just the motor of history in some way, potentially.
But I was talking about the most frequent word in the text.
Okay, I think online we have Peter Stalagras, and then Neil, all our friends online. Peter, go ahead.
I'm so sorry I couldn't be here for your talk, Roger, and thank you so much for more than 3 decades of wonderful presentations that have been really made the material text what it is. I wanted to pick up again on the dévoilé, and I was thinking about, what Liliane was saying, that one aspect, it seems to me, is a very conventional one, philosophical, that truth is naked and, rhetoric is false. But it also is going to take on a very specific resonance, it seems to me, in the French Revolution with the sans-culotte, to be a sort of fashion statement is to be, you know, sans culotte. And then the wonderful book by Maurice Agulon about the battle between Marianne and the Virgin Mary in village squares through the 19th century, where different villages literally erect. And the question to me of veiling is very complicated, because one of the things that's always happening in actual churches with the Virgin Mary, every statue of Virgin Mary that is popular, people come and dress her. They literally, so that's how you can tell the difference between a tourist, you know, for aesthetes, you go to see a statue without clothes. But if you go to worship in a Catholic church, you want to go to a statue of the Virgin that's been given a crown and perhaps neon lights even, you know, you have, so that all of these images are dressed up. So it seems to me there is actually a history of popular dressing up, as well as a complicated notion, and that will be battled out, as Maurice Agulon describes, in between Marianne and the Virgin Mary. And the Virgin Mary often seems to me anyway about veiling, creating veils, creating, you know, and glorifying by adding veils, whereas the antithetical is the sans culotte tradition of a kind of pulling away, of making, of unmasking.
Yeah. First, the sans culotte is wearing trousers. So you have you have to the dévoilement is the fact that he abandoned the traditional clothes of the noble and for these trousers of
not
the
running around
revolutionary.
naked.
No. And this other fact reinforced what I was thinking, but I have not followed up. That is to say, the first definition in the dictionary of the unveil is what you say, and also Sophie, is a relationship with the first meaning, that is to say, a Christian one. And, absolutely. The porter le voile as a signal of the religious communities for women, and also to abandon the veil is a form of distance taken. And so perhaps the resonance in some of these texts of the religious meaning is stronger than I have perhaps suggested.
And I guess the gendered resonance as well, if it's always a nun. It's always the veiled nun that is, or the.
I suppose it's so complex because, of course, in Manuel, for example, his book, the dévoilé is to make visible some hidden and secrets, but which are either a sexual dimension, the clergé dévoilé, or that are this political and policial dimension, the police dévoilé. So they are already a modern meaning that the unveil is to expose some sexual practices and or to political plots. But it's not exclusive of the other meaning, that is to say, would be another form of this transfer of sacrality that Mona Ozouf has put at the core of his book, that is to say, to use for civic and secular reality a language which was associated with a different form of sacrality.
Yes.
And I think the Cocarde Citoyenne is doing this, but I think still more now after this discussion, the unveiling.
Yeah. So let's get Rita and then Neil. Rita, go.
I just wanted to add to this that there is just to put this in the context, there is a long theological or exegetical tradition in which you veil scripture, you veil something sacred so that it should not be available to the vulgar populace. And it just seems really interesting here that it is the vulgarization of that which is hidden in, for whatever reason, that is continuous with or intersects with a revolutionary movement.
Thank you. It's a good fitting with this discussion we have about the the transfer of sacrality or transfer of a religious vocabulary upon new realities.
Neil, hello.
Hello, thank you, Roger, so much for this fabulous presentation. It brought me back to the cultural origins of the French Revolution and a chapter called "Do Books Make Revolutions?" Which I thought was really interesting in terms of your last comments regarding memory. And I was wondering whether almanacs make memory or make the future in periods of revolutions. I wanted to understand if you were getting at that when you were talking about the régime d'historicité, and whether the revolution represented a kind of a turning point where you see the use of almanacs, the use of these kind of ephemeral objects of memory that can now be written upon and reinscribed. Is that something that becomes a way that people deal with the incredible transformative nature of the revolution itself in terms of what it does to time?
Yeah. The reason why the conclusion was about first using this category that was coined by François Hartog, régime d'historicité or régime de temporalité, and starting, and in fact, retaken by in the quotation by Lynne, without reference necessarily to Hartog or anything of this, but with the idea that for Hartog, there was a successive situation of regime of historicity, which emphasized the past as lesson for the present, the future as the progress infinite and indefinite of mankind, and you see in perhaps the 19th century and still more in the 20th and 21st, they present devouring the historicity by the anxiety created by the uncertainty of the present. And so, following the suggestion, it would be perhaps that this regime could be thought of as a successive regime of historicity, but could be also sometimes be deciphered as interpenetrated, as associated in the same historical moment. And it seems to me that not every moment could be labeled as such, but in the case of 1789, clearly you have this conflation of the different regime of historicity. In a sense, the future is already written, and the past is forever present. And the idea to transform the remain of a monument or the writings as a monument was a form for giving this permanence of the past, which will never be erased, thanks to its erasure itself. And the presence of the future. So it could be a reflection about some historical moment in which the three temporality are conflated. And the future is already inscribed, and the past will last forever. And I suppose it's not the regular system of our temporality, but in some moment of crisis, it could happen. And also reflection by the beautiful essay by Bronislaw Baszko about the revolutionary calendar, starting in l'an 1 de la République, could be also located in this tension or complexity or intrication, because as I said, and Baszko observes this also, since 1889, some texts are dated not the en 1 de la République. We are not in the Republic. We are in the moment of a possible utopian and golden age alliance between the people of citizens and the king of the citizens. But nevertheless, with the king and with the citizen, which were the inheritors of the people, you have this possibility to start again a fresh moment, en un de la liberté. And some pamphlets will use before 1793 this form of dating their publication. And it's an example, of course, of this intuition of a future inscribed within the present. And whereas, as I said, it's an interesting observation about the destruction of the Bastille. The destruction is a condition of its survival.
I mean, just the most conventional of genres. There is no more conventional genre than the almanac. There is no more ubiquitous, endlessly repeat. It's the same thing. That's what people want in almanacs. Watch Jubert kind of attempt to modify in some way the form while not really modifying it.
Yeah, you are right. So the attention, in particular, with the beautiful work by Danton, was put upon all this series of texts which were conveying the destruction of the sacrality of the monarchy, which was conveying a new form of thinking about the social contract and so on. But what we can do also is to look at how some of the most traditional genres, the catechism, the almanacs, could have been invested by this new way of thinking in the inauguration of your exhibition here. I mentioned one of these catechism in which there was the question answer, but for a revolutionary content. And so this your investment of the most traditional forms, textual form and genre, by a new content could be also another illustration of this conflation of temporalities. Because the genre start in the 16th century, the beginning of the 16th century, and now they are invested by novelties that no one has ever seen.
So I think in the interest of time, we have to leave it there, but please look, those of you in the room, at what's on the table, and let's thank Roger for its time-bending end to the year.
Yeah.
Have a good
summer,
everybody. See you soon. Yes, Neil, thank you. So.